Good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A Legacy of Partnership, the Taiwan Relations Act at 45. This event is co-hosted by National Committee on American Foreign Policy. Before we start today's event, I would like to invite Ambassador Lee, NCAFP President, Ambassador Susan Elliott, Asia Society Policy Institute Vice President Danny Russell, President of Pacific Century Institute Raymond Bacart, and Susan Thornton from NCAFP Director to come to the stage for the group photo. Thank you. Thank you. Please take a seat. Now, please help me welcome Ambassador Lee for today's opening remarks. Thank you.
Ambassador Elliott, Director Thornton, Vice President Russell, Ambassador Buha, Excellencies, distinguished guests, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to everyone joining us here tonight for this event. I would like to firstly thank NCAFP for the opportunity to co-host this tonight's discussion commemorating the 45th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act. I think in our world today, people are facing a convergence of many pressing issues. In the Indo-Pacific, one of the most complex challenges facing us is maintaining the peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. The good news is this: through the TRA's mandate of U.S. commitment to ensuring the peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait, we have done well in managing these challenges for the past 45 years. Although we have our ups and downs for the past 45 years, the U.S. has stayed true to its word and intent in the TRA, which has served as a cornerstone of our comprehensive, durable, and mutually beneficial partnership. Over the past 45 years, the TRA has been one of an anchor of preserving peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, but has also helped advance commercial, cultural, and many forms of exchange between our two peoples. Nowadays, the discussion in Washington is not whether to deepen its relationship with Taiwan, but how best to do so, and vice versa. We deeply appreciate the U.S. House approval of the assistance package to Taiwan last Saturday. With the stake getting higher in the Indo-Pacific, Taiwan looks forward to working closely with the United States to make our rock-solid partnership even stronger in the years ahead. Tonight, we are privileged to host a distinguished panel of former ranking U.S. diplomats who have witnessed the enactment of the TRA and have been involved in its implementation. They will share their insights and perhaps some personal anecdote on how the TRA has been pivotal in shaping U.S. engagement with Taiwan. So thank you again for being with us tonight, and I hope everyone will find the panel discussion insightful and valuable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Lee. Now I'd like to invite NCAFP President and CEO Susan Elliott to come on stage to give us a few words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gloria, and thank you, Ambassador Lee, for that great welcome. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Susan Elliott. I'm the President and CEO of the National Committee on American Foreign Policy, and I want to thank all of you for coming out on this lovely evening to join us for tonight's discussion. I'm very excited to commemorate the 45th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act with this highly esteemed panel of former diplomats and colleagues of mine at the U.S. State Department. But before I begin, just saying a few remarks on behalf of the NCAFP Board of Trustees, members, and staff, I want to give my condolences to the people of Taiwan who have been experiencing a series of earthquakes and aftershocks in recent days, the most recent, I believe, today. So we are thinking of you. We wish the best for all our friends and colleagues in Taiwan during this difficult time. But I want to give a special thanks to Ambassador Lee and to all of our colleagues at the Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office in New York, especially Gloria and Karen, for their partnering with the NCAFP staff. For those of you who don't know, the National Committee on American Foreign Policy has a long history of conducting informal cross-Taiwan Strait talks with colleagues from Taiwan, mainland China, and the United States of America. So it's really a pleasure for us to have this event tonight to talk about the 45th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act. As many of you know, 2024 is an important year for a number of reasons. We have presidential elections, Taiwan held presidential elections, and there are elections around the world. But I think, tonight what we want to do is discuss the importance and effectiveness that the Taiwan Relations Act has had in maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and to highlight creative diplomacy, successes, and the evolution of the Taiwan Relations Act in preserving and expanding the partnership between the United States and Taiwan. Our panelists, I think, are no strangers to most of you. We have Ambassador Ray Burkhardt, Danny Russell, and Susan Thornton, all of whom spent the majority of their diplomatic careers working not only on Taiwan, but on countries of the Asia-Pacific regions. Their accomplishments are and have played pivotal roles in contributing to U.S. foreign policy in the Asia-Pacific region. So tonight, I'm looking forward to having them share their insights, lessons, and personal anecdotes from their respective distinguished diplomatic career. And before I turn the program over to Susan Thornton, who is the director of the NCAFP's Forum on Asia-Pacific Security, I'll just tell you a little bit about her. She's a colleague and friend. She had a distinguished career as a U.S. diplomat, culminating her service as Acting Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs. And she led East Asia policymaking at the State Department through many crises, not just thinking about the Taiwan Strait, but thinking about North Korea, escalating trade tensions with China, and a fast-changing international environment. So I'm going to let Susan introduce Danny and Ray, but I want to thank all of you, and especially Ambassador Lee and all of our friends here at TECO for inviting us to have a great program this evening in this beautiful hall with, if you haven't noticed this beautiful hand painting, ask the ambassador about it afterward. He can tell you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Lee. Sorry, Ambassador Elliott. So now I would like to invite the panelists to come onto the stage to start today's discussion. Thank you. So send the floor is yours.
Well, great. Thank you for those wonderful opening remarks, and thanks to all of you again for being here. We'll have a chance, hopefully you've had a chance to get a bite to eat, either before the event, or we'll have, I think, a chance to mingle a little bit and eat some more after the event and have something to drink. But I'm very much looking forward to engaging with all of you, and I hope we'll have a conversation, a moderated conversation here for about 45 minutes or so, and then we'll certainly be willing and able to take questions from the audience. So be thinking about not too hard questions, but we'll look forward to those. So as was mentioned, I'm Susan Thornton. I'm the director of the NCAFP's Asia Pacific Security Forum. To my left, I have Ambassador Ray Burkhart, who had a long and distinguished career at the State Department. He was, Ambassador to Vietnam, director of the American Institute in Taiwan, in Taipei. He's been the chairman, I think maybe the longest serving chairman we've ever had, of the American Institute of Taiwan in Washington, D.C., and held a number of other high-level State Department roles in Korea and other places in and around the Asia Pacific, and in other parts of the world as well, Latin America in particular. So I won't go into all the details because his career is so illustrious and long. I haven't memorized every position, but he is certainly well qualified to be here tonight to talk about the 45th anniversary of the Taiwan Relations Act. And to his left is my esteemed former boss, Assistant Secretary Danny Russell, who was the Assistant Secretary of the East Asia Pacific Bureau at the State Department when I was working under him. And he also has had a very long and distinguished diplomatic career. He was the director for Asia at the National Security Council under the Obama administration, and has served in a number of high-level diplomatic posts in and around Asia, Asia Pacific, in particular Japan, Korea, China, etc. And so is also very well positioned to be able to talk about our subject tonight. He's currently Vice President at the Asia Society, so is continuing that work. What we really wanted to focus on tonight in reviewing and thinking about the importance and the longevity of the Taiwan Relations Act 45 years later is to focus. We read a lot in the headlines about crises in the world. It seems like the fire alarms are ringing kind of constantly, but one of the fire alarms that hasn't rung is across the Taiwan Strait, and I think that's largely due to the creative diplomacy. Of course, we've worked a lot on the various aspects of deterrence, but also building up relationships across the Taiwan Strait, building up relations between the U.S. and Taiwan in what is a very complicated part of the world. And we wanted to have our esteemed diplomats come out tonight to talk to you about the importance of diplomacy in maintaining peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, and how that has been carefully sort of laid, and the architecture has been built over the last 4.5 decades. It's been, you know, a fairly quiet and behind the headlines process, the diplomacy across the Taiwan Strait, but very, very important. And so I hope tonight we can pull back the curtain a little bit and show you what life is like among people trying to manage, very carefully manage this complicated cross-strait situation, and at the same time maximize the kind of cooperation that we have between the United States and Taiwan and build those relations. So Ray, maybe I'll turn first to you, because 4.5 decades ago, you know, there was the need to come up with a framework or architecture for how the U.S. would continue its relations with Taiwan. And I've heard you often say in our travels that the U.S. Congress sees itself very much as the sort of invested in and the protector of the relationship with Taiwan. So this was, the TRA was drafted, of course, in the Congress. It's a piece of U.S. legislation, but had a lot of thought going into it and a lot of back and forth, I guess. So maybe you could just describe for us a little bit what you want to tell the audience about that.
Hi, good evening. Great to be here. Glad to see lots of people from Columbia here. and from Bard also. My daughter went to Bard, and so did Danny's daughter, so welcome. Yeah, 45 years, I was in Hong Kong as a relatively junior officer when 2 weeks before we broke relations with the Republic of China and recognized Beijing on January 1st, 1979. 2 weeks before that, we informed friendly governments we were going to do that. And the Taiwan Relations Act then was worked out after that change of relations took place and was not in place until April. And there actually was a first draft that came from the executive branch, from the Carter administration, and it was really not very good, very weak. And Congress saw that and said, that is not the kind of commitment we need to make to Taiwan. That's not the kind of arrangement we want to have to be able to continue a sort of unofficial relationship with Taiwan. And there was a lot of back and forth, and we ended up with a pretty good draft, a pretty good document. And certainly the strengthening of the defense relationship, that all came from the congressional side. There had been very little of that in the original draft that came from the Carter administration. The other thing I would say, which is quite an interesting history, is I didn't learn until more recent years, is that there was huge input from the American community in Taiwan, which is a very sort of American way to do foreign policy if we do it right, which is to have American civil society involved also. The American business community was actually instrumental in pushing for an act that kept in place all of the economic agreements and other agreements we had with Taiwan so that they wouldn't die when we ceased to have diplomatic relations with Taiwan. And not only that, it put in place mechanisms for how we could have new agreements. And today we have, I don't know how many. When I last spoke on this, I gave a talk on this subject 10 years ago, it was over 100. I think it's probably over 200 now, agreements on everything from, security of the Kaohsiung port, air travel, trade, agricultural cooperation, S&T cooperation, you name it. Relationship between our law enforcement authorities. All of these things, were negotiated after '79. Just two couple quick comments about it. Most of the attention always gets to the sort of the defense commitment, and that was, of course, a critical part of the document, and still is. Want me to stop and you ask more content? Okay. 2 points. The first one was that we would sell Taiwan defense equipment, and of course it's much more than just selling equipment. It's also training. It's also it's all of that kind of cooperation. The second part is that the U.S. was committed to maintain the capability to be able to deal with an emergency caused by aggression, and then it was all things that were listed: quarantine, boycott, coercive action against Taiwan, and that the President and the Congress would confer immediately on what action to take. And that was all done, in the document made it very clear in the preamble that all of these commitments were, and all of the, everything had been done, and the establishment of relations with the PRC in the expectation that Taiwan's future would be decided in a peaceful way. And of course that expectation remains and is probably the most fundamentally important line in the entire document. I would say that while all the focus in most people's knowledge is about those defense-related portions, it's continuing all of the other functions of an embassy in the guise, in the form of the American Institute in Taiwan that was actually the most important, the most fundamental part of the document. The American Institute in Taiwan has all of the functions of a normal embassy. It has representatives of all of the agencies you would expect to see in an embassy. And it carries out all the functions of an embassy. But it's not. It's this very odd, special organization, a public corporation that was created to carry out these functions.
Okay.
And, yeah.
I'm going to ask you about that more later, but, and just, I mean, I want everyone to know, just as a follow-on to what Ray said about the importance of the preamble of the Taiwan Relations Act, the actual title, it's called the long title of the Taiwan Relations Act is, it's probably longer than this, but this is what I was able to fit on the page. An act to help maintain peace, security, and stability in the Western Pacific and someplace.
I can't help you.
Oh, and the continuation of commercial, cultural, and other relations between the people of the United States and Taiwan and for other purposes. That's the title of the act in the Congress. So they wanted to make sure that everyone was clear on the peace and stability part and on the continuation of all the relations that we normally had going on between the two peoples as a consequence of this document.
This was before every congressional act had to translate into a snappy acronym.
Clever little, yeah, acronym, yeah. TRA is pretty good, though. I like it.
The two uses of the word other in that title are very important, and you could roll just about anything through that door. Yeah.
That's a little diplomatic trick. Put other into your diplomatic communications. But Danny, I wanted to go to you because, you know, speaking of diplomatic tricks, you know, this is all very nicely laid out in a piece of legislation, and we have the American Institute in Taiwan and a lot of kind of guiding regulations or guidelines about how we should go about conducting our relations between the U.S. and Taiwan under this framework. But, and you know, we talk a lot about the status quo. So obviously from '79 until today, 4.5 decades later, you know, you're maintaining this status quo, but a lot of things change over time. And I'm just, I'd like to hear a little bit from you about sort of what are the things that you've seen that, you know, show that we have to, inside the status quo, kind of, it's a dynamic status quo and things do change. So yes, this is for Danny. You have to wait. I'll get back to you, Ray.
So that is a wonderful question. I'm truly glad that you asked it, because I often think and have occasionally made the case that the status quo is a misleading formula for describing the situation and the relationship. You used a key word, which is dynamic. I think in terms of a dynamic equilibrium. The fact of the matter is Taiwan has changed, the United States has changed, mainland China has changed. But throughout the course of the last 45 years, we have worked at sustaining a kind of equilibrium that maintained peace, that sought to protect and enlarge the ability of the people on Taiwan and their elected leaders to prosper, to function, and to contribute to the regional and the sort of global good. And I think going forward, our lodestone needs to be sustaining a peaceful equilibrium and not being locked in a static position in ways that can be brittle and that risk friction when these three parts fail to move and adjust to each other. That's a little bit theoretical. In practical terms, When I returned to the State Department in 2013, I followed Kurt Campbell as Assistant Secretary, and at least until you arrived at my express request to take over as the deputy and the Danny manager, I tried to follow in Kurt's footsteps in one respect with respect to Taiwan. Kurt, towards the end of his tenure, had embraced the notion of according Taiwan more dignity and more respect. This was not to alter or undermine any of the fundamentals that Ray has described, but it was a mindset that asked, are we so handcuffed by certain traditions and habits and the letters of the law that we can't reflect the growth of our relationship in the way that we deal in a practical matter? So it was small and fairly subtle things. We began discreetly opening the door to meetings with the TECRO representative. At that time it was Jason Yuan. So he could come into the Department of State. I met with a lot of business leaders. You don't have to be a recognized government official to make your way into the State Department. And so we were able to do that. We did it in a discreet and thoughtful way because we weren't trying to make a big public signal. But it was a signal, certainly, to the government and the people on Taiwan of respect. Similarly, some of the initiatives that we developed, and by we I mean Susan, like the GCTF that I'm sure we will talk about, the general improved access for Taiwan visitors, ultimately the decision to send the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Gina McCarthy, in 2014 to Taipei to mark the 20th year of really valuable cooperation between the U.S. and Taiwan on environmental issues and standards. The courtesy of providing an in-depth but closed-door briefing to Taiwan representatives after a major U.S.-China summit or encounter to be more transparent, to remove some of the uncertainties. The Secretary of State began, there may have been occasions when this happened, but we were deliberate in ensuring that the Secretary of State had an opportunity to meet with Taiwan's representative at APEC summits, so Lian Chen or Vincent Shou, and things like the visa waiver program that took years to put into effect, but that treated the citizens of Taiwan, the people on Taiwan, the business people on Taiwan with real respect. This basic concept of according dignity in our relationship with Taiwan, I think, is an example of the evolution in the broader context of dynamic equilibrium.
I can definitely attest that some of these sensible adjustments and shows of respect were not always seen in that light across the strait on the other side. So there was a lot of deft and efforts at diplomacy and explaining and communication in order to let Beijing know that what we were doing was something that we were firm about and that we had purpose behind, but it wasn't meant to sort of be an embarrassment or poke them in the eye, and that's part of the diplomatic kind of task at hand. One of the things, you mentioned some of the things on the what we did with Taiwan. Another area where we kind of had a dynamic status quo was on the sort of workings of the American Institute in Taiwan. And I went there to study Chinese in I think, late 90s. At that time, I had to resign from the State Department in order to go to, be affiliated with AIT to do my language studies. And so that's one concrete example of something that over time, we were able to say, why are we doing this? Why do people have to resign? Who knows even that they resign and then they are rehired by the State Department? It's just a lot of extra paperwork and bureaucracy. We don't have to do that. So there are a lot of things like that that we started out thinking that we had to do it this way, and then over time it just became clear that we didn't. So Ray, I want you follow up on anything you want from what Danny said, but I know you and I were at a lot of AIT board meetings together. We have a board, it's a nonprofit, as you said, a corporation, and there's a lot that goes into managing AIT, and it has really evolved over the years.
Yeah, Danny is absolutely right about the sort of fundamental change that was made at that time during the Obama administration, and Kurt was very important in driving that. I think a lot of us were honored to be part of the team on that. You, Evan Medeiros, myself. I remember it was to show respect for Taiwan. It was to show recognition that Taiwan, against all odds, had done the most extraordinary economic remake of itself, and also political development, and that it deserved respect and deserved to be taken seriously. It had become, to put it bluntly, Taiwan had become an important place. I often think about the fact that we have this odd way in which we conduct relations with Taiwan, but actually AIT and our relationship with Taiwan is of more importance to American interests than many of our formal diplomatic relationships around the world. I know that because I've worked on some of those. Taiwan's an important place. And as I look back to '79, I think it's important to keep in mind that the people in the Carter administration who were working, and they were good people, people I respect, like my former professor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, or like my old friend, the late, great Dick Holbrooke. They did not think we would be talking about U.S.-Taiwan relations 45 years later. They certainly did not think we would be talking about Taiwan as a very important place in the world. Taiwanese have a lot to be proud of, and we fortunately kept up with it. In the early days, there were many things that handcuffed the way AIT operated. All the meetings had to take place at the Taipei guest house. We couldn't go into the foreign ministry. We couldn't go into the presidential office building. I think we got those crazy rules we got rid of fairly early on. Later on, we realized that why do we only send retired military personnel to work in Taiwan? We're not developing any new people who know about Taiwan, and so that was changed about 20 years ago. So we sort of been chipping away at these things over a long period of time.
I know there was a big effort at one point in recent years to really sort of renew our commitment to Taiwan through AIT, and we actually built a fantastic new building in Taiwan in the Neihu district. So if any of you ever get a chance to go by there and see that building or go in, it's a really fabulous new facility. But let me come back to you, Danny. You mentioned GCTF, the Global Cooperation and Training Framework. Ray just said that Taiwan has become an important place, vibrant democracy, really dynamic economy, island of 23 million people. I think it is our 10th largest trading partner. Is that right still? Sometimes the numbers move around.
Actually moved up to 8th, right?
8th, is that right? Okay, 8th largest trading partner, which is just astounding when you think about it. But one of the things that we worked on a lot was also to try to expand Taiwan's international space, which of course, if you don't have a official diplomatic relationship, it can be a kind of a difficult area to work. And you know, we worked on a number of things to try to make sure that this was an area where, again, Taiwan's sort of respect and dignity were upheld. So maybe if, I don't know, we talked about, you know, the pandemic and health cooperation. I mean, we worked a lot on Taiwan's observership in various UN organizations, including WHO, but I don't know if you have anything further to say about international space.
Oh, absolutely. It's something I feel and felt passionate about, and it's one of the issues. You mentioned Beijing. I went frequently, both as NSC Senior Director and then as Assistant Secretary to Beijing. I met not only with the U.S.-China relationship managers in the Foreign Ministry and elsewhere, but also with the Taiwan Affairs Office, the minister and whatever the title is in the State Council. For the entire time that I was in the NSC, that was a certain �W𝐨𝐝𝐸. And Kurt and I would meet with him, extended meetings that I have to tell you were not acrimonious, were generally pretty constructive, and created the opportunity for us, as Ray said to, and Susan pointed out, to explain sort of what we're doing, why, and to make the case, not just batting away Beijing's criticism, but to make the case for why this was smart and why this, including, I will say, U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, why this created space for possible improvements in cross-strait relations to, for example, give the people on Taiwan the confidence to hold consultations, to explore possible futures and so on. I'm not saying we persuaded them, but we were able to have discussions about Taiwan-related policy and issue that didn't involve fisticuffs and throwing ashtrays and so on. So that was a bit of a different era. I will say that we never ever broached the U.S. commitment, and maybe I have an anecdote about the 6 assurances if you want to go there. But we never broached the commitment not to either preview or seek prior consultation with Beijing about any policy decision, let alone an arms sale decision that we were undertaking with Taiwan. But the international space issue was an area that veered between collaboration and warfare with Beijing. It was possible to help Beijing reach a decision to accept or at least sit still for Taiwan's observer status in the World Health Assembly that began in 2009 and continued for the next 6 or 7 years. Taiwan had been already attending APEC meetings, and as I described, at least one of several aspects where the U.S. enhanced Taiwan's role in the APEC context. There was WTO ministerial participation, COP, the climate meeting, some agricultural meetings, and so on. And I think in 2013, an observer status at ICAO, right, for international air traffic safety. We made the case again and again that there are many organizations for which statehood isn't a requirement, and there are many permissible status options for Taiwan in organizations where statehood is a requirement for full membership, but that Taiwan's role in the world, Taiwan's responsibilities for an important geography in Asia, and importantly, Taiwan's contributions to the world, whether it was in health or technology or disaster relief, were so important that Beijing was hurting the international community by blocking Taiwan from making contributions. This became a source of great frustration to me in government. And what I increasingly focused on was the question of what can Taiwan do and how can Taiwan get credit for all it is doing by way of contributions to regional and global interests. Whether that was disaster relief or women's empowerment or commercial entrepreneurship, I mean, in a very wide range of areas. Now, when there was a disaster, the northeast Japan tsunami earthquake, Fukushima disaster, Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines, Taiwan was there and Beijing didn't get a vote. In many other circumstances and instances, including in the economic field and in the technology field, Taiwan was a valued partner for the countries in the region. And I think that was part of the logic behind the GCTF, although since Susan is really the author and architect, it shouldn't be me telling this story. But through the GCTF, we aimed at creating a platform by which Taiwan could more easily share its expertise and its contributions with countries that needed it, where Taiwan could do more in capacity building for countries that really need it, where Taiwan could get credit for the important things that it was doing and the value that it was adding, and to do it in a way that deprived Beijing of the ability to body block Taiwan's role.
Back. No, I'm coming to you next, Ray, so you're going to follow up. So one of the things that we haven't really touched on, and I saw on this slide presentation when I was here earlier, you know, a lot of visitors to Taiwan, including Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, her August 2022 visit. But, you know, the framework of the Taiwan Relations Act doesn't really speak too much in specific to how are we going to continue our government-to-government communications with Taiwan. You know, it talks about cultural, economic, and other ties. But the AIT chairman, you know, is very much at the center of very important continuation of intense communications, you know, between officials in the U.S. government and the, you know, officials in Taiwan. And Ray did that job for, I can't even remember how long. I thought it was
10 years and 7 months.
And so, you know, it's a very, obviously, I think everyone can understand, delicate kind of operation that has to be undertaken there. And I'd love, Ray, for you to talk about that or anything else you think the good people here would like to know about the TRA and what we're...
As was often the case, Kurt Campbell put it best. He defined I did both jobs. I was our representative in Taipei for 2 years, which is what the New York Times calls the de facto ambassador to Taiwan. And then I had a vacation from Taiwan Affairs for 3 years in Vietnam. And then I came back to Taiwan Affairs as the chairman of AIT. And Kurt Campbell said, the chairman is the US-based representative to Taiwan. So, which is, part of the definition. The chairman goes, sort of goes out to Taiwan and brings the word from Washington. I would say, frankly, our current chair, Laura Rosenberger, was a perfect choice because she knows all the key people in the administration. She can go out there and really be seen as someone who speaks for the administration and brings the word to Taipei. And also, of course, brings back to Washington how they react and what they say. So that's a big part of the job. The chairman also accompanies Taiwan presidents and vice presidents when they do their travels, or their transits, excuse me, through the United States. And that's that you end up spending a lot of time and a lot of free time able to talk with the president in a way you would never be able to do ordinarily, and cover a lot of issues and explore them. The chairman also is, at least when I was doing it, I think it's still true, participated in policy meetings in Washington about things we would, arms sales, other decisions, how we're going to deal with Taiwan. So it's, in my sort of unfortunately blunt New York way, I would sometimes say I was the chair of a fake corporation that's actually part of the State Department. But that's, I withdraw those remarks, yeah. But,
Good thing I never heard you say that.
But there's another piece.
I got to tell you, once I was at a meeting of the NCAFP here in New York, and there were some Chinese scholars, some famous Chinese scholars, experts on Taiwan. And so one of them, this is when I was AIT chairman, and he looked at my card and he realized I still had a state.gov internet address. He commented on that. And then he looked at my bio. He said, so you were the American Consul General in Taiwan, and then you went immediately from that to be the AIT director in Taipei. I said, that's correct. He said, then you went from that directly to be the ambassador to Vietnam. Correct. Then you went from that to become the chairman of AIT. I said, correct. He said, do you think you're actually fooling anybody?
To which you said, you're correct.
You're correct. But all of this is sort of very important to being able to manage what is a very complicated situation, and which has actually been tremendously successful. So I think we all owe all of our architects of this relationship a real debt of gratitude, because it takes a lot of coordination, as you can imagine, and a lot of work in the trenches to try to hammer out and maximize the space while still keeping everything peaceful and stable. So my hat's off to all of...
One thing, you're going to say.
Go ahead.
One thing, the AIT model was actually followed afterwards by many other countries. So it made it a kind of indirect contribution to Taiwan's ability to maintain good relations and ties with other countries who adopted, not everything exactly the same, but adopted many aspects of the AIT model.
Yeah, and that is actually really important. You have something? No?
I do, but it's...
Go ahead, because I'm going to go to questions, so hold those questions.
Yeah. So what I want to say, and I'm delighted to be able to beat Ray to the punch on this, because he's got a similar story, a better one, no doubt, is that 45 is the new 35. And what I mean by that is I stumbled over the fact that exactly 10 years ago, almost to the day, I testified before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on the Taiwan Relations Act at its 35th anniversary. And I won't torture you by reading any of it, but suffice it to say that the things that I said in the first several paragraphs of my testimony, beginning with U.S.-Taiwan relations have never been better, are all things that could be said today. I gave a long list of milestones and accomplishments. Well, that list has grown much longer. I think perhaps the two big differences are, I think at the time I said that Taiwan was in the top 20 of our trading partners, so we've just learned that it's now number 8. But the other thing was that I was then able to speak somewhat positively about encouraging progress in terms of Taiwan's international space. And of course, today that progress has vaporized, and Beijing is dead set on not just preventing membership by Taiwan or observership by Taiwan, but keeping Taiwan nationals out of the visitor center in the UN, and pretty mean-spirited things like that. I was, however, tormented by Senator Rubio in that testimony, in that session. And it goes to both of your points that the Congress still sees itself as the protector of Taiwan and of the Taiwan Relations Act. He demanded that I swear allegiance to the 6 assurances that had been, that Ronald Reagan as president had made and had then Ambassador Lilly deliver, but that as far as my colleagues told me, remained classified. And while it had been leaked, it was one of the worst kept secrets. I was nervous, just as a legal matter, as a U.S. government official, of an open testimony in the Senate of directly addressing the 6 assurances. So instead, I tried politely to decline. I said to Senator Rubio, what I can say is that the U.S. does not mediate between Taipei and Beijing, that the U.S. does not consult Beijing on arms sales. We have not committed to cease arms sales. In fact, the Obama administration has made $11 billion in arms sales and so on. We're not pressuring Taiwan to accept deals and so on. So I went through them and said, this is our policy. But that wasn't good enough. And he issued a really nasty, scathing press release the minute that my testimony was over, excoriating me for my failure. And then fast forward to the Trump administration, and lo and behold, they declassified the 6 assurances, and all those scars I incurred were for nothing.
Sorry about that. But we diplomats, we incur a lot of scars in the course of our duties to uphold U.S. national interests. So I think, yeah, we survived. So I know that, we've been talking about the diplomacy. There are a lot of other things that go on in U.S.-Taiwan relations. One just point I want to end on, though, is the importance of communication. And one of the things that was happening at the time 10 years ago when you were testifying, I think, is that not only had U.S.-Taiwan relations never been better, but there was a channel of consistent communication directly across the Taiwan Strait at that time, which of course we have not now seen for the last number of years, and which is, I think, of great concern in terms of maintaining peace and stability. We want good communication among all sides to try to make sure there's no miscommunication or misunderstanding that might lead to some kind of escalation that no one wants to see. And so we work very hard on this at NCAFP. I know we have a lot of good cooperation from my two fellow panelists on that. And it's not always easy, as you can imagine, but we will continue to pursue that. In the meantime, of course, continue to have great communication with our partners in Taiwan, who we very much appreciate, especially TECO here in New York, who's been a great partner for us, and Ambassador Lee and all your colleagues, always great to work with. So with that, let me turn it, I'm told we have a little bit of flexibility on the ending time, so we can go for a few questions here. If you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand and I'll just call. Okay, first here, then in the back, then here. I'll take three at once.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Schaefer, chairman of NCAFP.
Oh, I recognize you.
Danny, I thought you put very nicely the situation we face, which is not to try to maintain the status quo, because things are changing all the time, but to have a stable, dynamic equilibrium. As we try to look at the forces that are pushing dynamically, there are a lot of them, but let me just ask you about politics. Which is the most serious driver of political dynamic here? Is it politics in the mainland, politics in Taiwan, politics in the US, or the rest of the world?
Okay, we're going to hold that. Go to the back there. Thank you. Please introduce yourself. Yeah.
Sean King, Park Strategies. Whenever the word Taiwan is used in any organization name, there's always great controversy around it. Like when Taiwan opened its trade office in Vilnius, Lithuania a few years ago, or when a US company has Taiwan listed on its website. Why has there never been any controversy about the fact that AIT is called the American Institute in Taiwan and not on Taiwan or in Taipei? Thank you.
Great, thanks. And then, yes, go ahead, right here.
Hi, my name is Dania. I'm a BART student from the MAX program. My question is, I guess, for all the panelists, is that after more than 2 years after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, how in this span of time does the attitudes, Chinese and American attitudes towards Taiwan have changed over this course of time?
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So maybe Danny, I don't know, the politics question seems to be coming to you. So any of the three questions, please, and then I'll go to you, Ray.
Yeah, Jeff, the answer to your question is yes. Politics in Beijing, politics in Washington, politics in Taipei are the wild cards, are the potential and the, in fact, de facto drivers of instability. And they are mutually reinforcing. So we've got political pressure cubed. There is a very marked, significant drift in political attitudes among the people on Taiwan. And it's not just a KMT versus a DPP issue. There is a growing sense of Taiwan identity, a growing repugnance to the kind of affiliation with the PRC that Beijing seems to have in mind and has practiced in Hong Kong. I think at the same time, the growth of the Taiwan economy, the sort of globalization of Taiwan's contributions and Taiwan's engagement has changed minds and led to evolution on Taiwan. And in Beijing, we hear the words reform and opening, we hear the word patience, we hear the word peaceful resolution, but at the same time, we hear some very dissonant notes. This non-negotiable demand to accede to the formula of the 92 consensus, for example, on intolerance for more creative workarounds, tremendous amount of intimidating behavior and multiple forms of pressure and co-option. And in the United States, the hardening of negative attitudes towards China, the conviction that Beijing has malevolent objectives. These are political factors that make the situation across the Taiwan Strait much more uncertain, much more difficult to deal with.
Ray, I think it would be great to have you address this issue of the symbols and the language and why one case it's sensitive and another case maybe not so, but take whatever question you want.
I've often wondered about that myself. I think we got away with it. We were early. And so we call it the American Institute in Taiwan. That was way back in 1979. Beijing was not quite so quick off the mark to criticize everybody who referred to Taiwan in some way that upset their sensitivity at that time. We got away with it. I think it's a rather, not a very elegant answer, but I think it's the truth. So, yeah. On the other question about Ukraine, there have been libraries worth of paper filled with comments on how the Ukraine issue has had relevance one way or another on Taiwan issue. I think there are some truths in all of that. There's no question that it was, the good news is that the formation of international alliances to respond to this aggression and the courage and determination of the people in Ukraine to fight had a sobering effect on Beijing. In fact, I wouldn't have said that if I hadn't have heard it even from some highly respected and very well connected to the government Chinese scholars who have visited here in New York. They particularly have made the point about the fact that what happened in Ukraine is sort of a wake-up call that when you start an invasion, when you start a military solution to a problem, you don't know how bad it can get. And that realization is there in China, more than it had been before because of Ukraine. I think on the more negative side, it opened up it opened up opportunities for the Chinese to kind of try to exploit disinformation in Taiwan, saying, look, the Americans didn't do anything to defend Taiwan. I mean, didn't do anything to defend Ukraine. So now you know what your fate would be. Of course, totally different situation. Ukraine was not a NATO member. There is no Taiwan Relations Act pledges to Taiwan, to Ukraine, and so forth. So, but it did that open that up, and we know that there was a certain amount of unease in Taiwan about that at the beginning. I think it's abated somewhat, but it did cause some unease for a while in Taiwan.
Great. Do we have any other questions? Okay, let's take these two, and if anyone, and this, and right here, and then that'll be our last round in case. So if you have a question, get your hand up now. So yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is 𝐌𝐨𝐝𝐸 Teraoka from Columbia University. Thank you so much for your thoughtful conversations. I have many questions, but because today's event is about TRA, and TRA is very unique to America, and it allows the United States somewhat sort of legal domestic justification, some legal credibility to U.S. support for Taiwan. There are many other countries, as you just said, which don't have this kind of legal structure that sometimes allow them excuse not to support Taiwan, or sometimes they blame the lack of legal justification or domestic legal framework not to be able to overtly support Taiwan in some ways. Could you speak to this difficulty of other countries kind of facing issues with supporting Taiwan, and when they refer to the lack of TRA in their own systems, how would you respond to that?
Great, thanks. There was a question behind her. Yeah.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm Dean Chen from Ramapo College, New Jersey. I have a question regarding 6 assurances. One of the 6 assurances is about sovereignty issue over Taiwan. And I believe there have been several versions on the description of that assurance. One, I believe, was saying that I think many years ago, the U.S. does not change its long-standing position on sovereignty over Taiwan. And more recent years, after the declassification in 2019, I believe the language changed to U.S. Does not take any position on sovereignty over Taiwan. So are these changes reflect any nuanced meaning behind it? I'd like to hear your comments on that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then there was one question here in the front.
Hi, thank you. I'm Felicia Lin with the Talking Taiwan podcast. So much has changed in the past 45 years in the cross-strait relations. And so I'm wondering if you think that the Taiwan Relations Act is sufficient to maintain cross-strait stability for the next 45 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Ray, do you want to go first, or?
I would just say on the last question, as we've talked here, we have the Taiwan Relations Act, and the way it's been implemented, not the language itself, of course, but the way it's been implemented has evolved, and it can continue to evolve. And it's a wonderful document because it has all this key, kind of like our Constitution, there's all the key principles in it, but those principles can be, there can be interpretations given, and there can be ways they are implemented, which adjust to the situation as it changes on the ground. So I think I'm relatively confident along those lines. On the, there was a, what was the other?
6 assurances?
The 6 assurances, the sovereignty. Yeah, the very important subject. And to give an absolutely definitive answer, I'd want to do some research. But certainly in recent years, and almost the entire era in which I've worked on Taiwan, we have stuck with the line that we do not, the United States does not take a position on the status of Taiwan or on the sovereignty of Taiwan. And that it was very important also in dealing with efforts by China to try to take the, to try to force the United Nations to use language like Taiwan, China, and so forth. It's odd. I mean, only the United States, I suppose, would take a position that our position is that we have no position. But
and I don't think it's changed.
It hasn't changed. It has not changed.
The not changing and the having no position would be the same thing.
Yeah,
right?
I would definitely not say that it's changed. And what was the third question?
About countries that don't have legal frameworks.
Yeah, you may have more experience with that.
So all three questions hinge on the legal issue here, the law structure or the terminology, for example, in the TRA. Ray made the analogy to the U.S. Constitution, and there's a lot to learn from that analogy that sets out key principles, but that can be interpreted and applied in ways that are appropriate to the era that we're in and the realities of the nation, setting aside a few strict constructionists. I think another analogy is British common law, where the structures, legal structures, political commitments are aggregating over time, and that the TRA represented a very important building block in that evolution. I think Susan used the word evolution. I think that's exactly right. So on the one hand, we Americans are very fond of saying that there is no change in our one China policy. But there is evolution, as I said earlier, in part because the situation and the players continue to change and develop and evolve. So we shouldn't be strict constructionists. We should be true to the values and the spirit of our Taiwan policy, our One China policy, and the TRA. Obviously, we have to be mindful of all of our commitments, but not prisoners of them. So with respect, Ayumi, to your question, I can't imagine what government you might be thinking of when you talk about countries that don't have a legal structure per se for dealing with Taiwan-related questions. But what we're seeing in, I'll just pick a country at random, Japan, is an adjustment to the realities of the world. And I think here is a case where the Russian invasion of Ukraine made a direct impact on Japanese national security thinking. And Prime Minister Kishida has not been shy about saying, you know, Ukraine today is potentially East Asia tomorrow. Those are dots that were very easy for the government of Japan to connect. And so I think that circumstances have evolved in a way that don't necessitate the same sort of legal framework as the TRA, which, as Ray said at the outset, was really an accompaniment to the dramatic shift of recognition from the Republic of China to the People's Republic of China. So it was, it served an important role at that moment, and it has continued to serve an important role today, and I think will be relevant for the next 45 years, but I wouldn't go so far as to say that it is the TRA that is maintaining peace and security in the Taiwan Strait. The TRA is focusing the attention of U.S. leaders. It's setting out the star by which they should navigate, but it is the leaders in the United States, the leaders in China, the leaders in Taiwan that ultimately have the responsibility for maintaining that peace and security, and who will be the determinants of whether it can be sustained for the next 45 years.
And not only is it the leaders of those three places, but it's also the people who work for those leaders who do this on a day-to-day basis and actually understand the complexities and all of the necessary kind of principles and how to carry these things out, which my fellow panelists have been doing very, very steadfastly and determinedly for the last many, many years. So I hope you'll join me in giving them a round of applause. And please join us to mingle in the back for a reception. And thank you very much to TECO and everyone for putting on this program.
Yeah.